Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Lori Luongo. The topic of my presentation today is postmodern contemporary literature characteristics and a hero from a novel from this literary period. The reason this topic is useful for you is this era depicts how people reacted to the modern era. We're going to talk about three things. These are, first, the literary time period, postmodern contemporary period, 1945 to the present. Secondly, a historical period during this literary era. And finally, we're going to look at a hero in the literature that was then, this is now, authored by S.E. Hinton in 1971. Due to the limited time that I have, I ask that you leave your questions for the end of my presentation since I only have 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you. Firstly, I'll summarize the literary period, postmodern contemporary, of 1945 to the present. This literary period blends literary genres and styles. It attempts to break free of modernist forms. Multicultural authors from diverse cultures made their way into the literary scene during this period. During this era, there's a focus on a constant changing world and no absolute truth is affirmed, which allows for more religious freedom during this period. S.E. Hinton is an author from this literary period. Female authors weren't yet accepted, so she used her initials instead of her first name. She actually wrote her first book, The Outsiders, while still in high school. She signed her book deal on the day she graduated. She got her second book deal, which was That Was Then, This Is Now, on the day that she got married. Hinton didn't like that there wasn't many young adult novels, and she thought that teenagers might, like herself, might like to read books that dealt with real issues. The book That Was Then, This Is Now is a realistic novel, and it has a coming-of-age theme. That's the end of my first point. Now we'll move on to the second point, which is about the historical period. During this time, we had the Vietnam War, which was a long and costly war that resulted in over 3 million deaths. Included in that total was 58,000 Americans. We have the 60s in this time period, which is when the novel That Was Then, This Is Now was set. This book was set during the 60s. Social and political movements were reaching intense and pivotal points. It was a time of hippies, racism against blacks, and the civil rights movement. Lastly, I'll move on to the third point, which is about a hero in the novel. That Was Then, This Is Now. This novel was set in the 60s in a rough neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Socioeconomic divides, racial divides, and ideological divides are all necessary to the overall understanding of this novel. These divides lead to tensions between different groups and eventually to tensions between individuals. This novel, as I mentioned earlier, is also a coming-of-age novel. In the novel That Was Then, This Is Now, the hero is a bar owner named Charlie. He was a role model to two main characters in the story and a model of the American dream for them as well. He is also a hero because he died trying to protect the boys from some men that they had hustled in Poole. After this incident is when Brian, the main character, has his coming of age. He becomes more mature, caring, and responsible, and he also makes a difficult decision to turn in his best friend that lives with him for drugs. All of this coming of age came after his friend's death. Charlie was a hero that influenced Brian even after his death. And that's all for this point. In conclusion, in this presentation, my objectives were to introduce you to characteristics of postmodern contemporary literature and a hero from a novel written during this literary period and the historical period during this time. I have covered 3 main points. Firstly, the postmodern contemporary literary period. Secondly, we talked about the historical period within this literary period. And finally, we discussed Charlie, a hero in the novel That Was Then, This Is Now. I hope you have found my presentation useful. Thank you. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, then that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.